Okay. So, show of hands, how many of you guys know what a copyright is or what it does? Okay. How many of you guys know what fair use is? Yeah, that's about right. So today, boys and girls, we're going to talk about Leslie's favorite thing, which is fair use. And fair use is why we can take copyrighted things like, say, happy birthday, and sing them in little Toastmasters meetings, other than the fact that we won't get caught. But the point is, we could do it anyway because there's fair use. So copyright obviously is what protects a work like a book or a movie, something that we can't protect by saying, hey, you can't take that off the shelf because there are others on the shelf, so you could take it off the shelf. When we want, let's say that you want to make a parody, and let's say that either the person who owns the copyright has said, no, you can't make a parody, or you don't know how to contact the person who has the copyright, and then you make the parody, and the person who has the copyright says, oh my God, that's my copyrighted thing, I'm going to sue you. And you're like, oh God, I've been sued, what do I do? Well, you assert a fair use defense. How does this work? Fair use has 4 different prongs. And the first of those prongs is the purpose and character of your use. There are actually 4 sub-factors to this prong, but the important one is called the transformative works prong. So, Pretty Woman, you guys probably all know that song. In the 1980s, 1990s, Two Live Crew did another version of it, which is filthy, let me tell you. But it changes the words, but it doesn't change the actual song. It's definitely still Pretty Woman. And Roy Orbison and A-Cup Rose sued Two Live Crew, and they were like, hey, no, you can't do this. And the court said, well, actually, this song says something completely new about the original song, and so it's transformative, and in that case, it stands for fair use. So yeah, actually, they can do this. The same pretty much what happened with The Wind Done Gone, which is a parody of Gone with the Wind. It's written from the point of view of one of the African Americans in the book, and the estate of Margaret Mitchell freaked out, and the court said, well, no, this adds something to our canon. This says something completely new. It's transformative, therefore it falls under fair use. So that's the first factor. The second factor is the nature of the copyrighted work. There's kind of a long spectrum of copyrighted works. And you can actually copyright a news story, but you can't copyright the facts in the news story. So newspapers and news stories tend to be sort of a weak copyright, what we call them. But something like Monet's Water Lilies, which by the way is not under copyright anymore, but it was a pretty picture, so I chose it, is super creative and is something that the courts really consider to be part of the creative scheme of the author. And so it has a much stronger copyright. So it's much easier to get fair use for something that has a weak copyright than something that has a strong copyright. That does not mean that you can't get fair use for something that has a strong copyright. Obviously something like Pretty Woman would have had a strong copyright. It just means that that sort of weighs against you in the fair use determination. The third factor is amount and substantiality. And this is a hard one because it sort of depends on the court. So there was a case where the Beastie Boys took 3 measures of another artist's song and sampled it in one of their songs. And the court said, yeah, it's 3 measures, like it's fine, it's fair use. But there was another case where a news outlet took a very small percentage of a book and released it before the book was published. And the courts looked at it and they said, well, yeah, it's a very small percentage, but it's the substantial part of the book. It's the part that everybody wants to read. So it's not fair use because it's the most substantial part of the book. So it depends on what you take and how much of it you take. The final factor is all about the money. It's the effective use upon a potential or existing market. And what this really comes down to is whether you're using it for commercial or non-commercial use. This is why we can sing Happy Birthday in our Toastmasters group, because we're not using it for commercial use. If you're not using it for commercial use, it's much more likely to be considered fair use. That said, if you are using it for commercial use, that doesn't mean it's not fair use. Obviously, Two Live Crew was making money off of their song. The woman who wrote Wind and Gone made money off of her book. So again, it's all part of a spectrum that the court has to consider and put together, and it has to decide what makes fair use happen. And honestly, at this point, the law is so up in the air, it's hard to tell you what's gonna happen. But the point is, fair use is what allows us to sing happy birthday, it's what allows us to have awesome parodies, it's what allows us to have commentary, it's what allows us to have educational tools in the classroom and other things that interrupt the copyright scheme. It is the last defense of the First Amendment against corporate copyright, and it is awesome. You should know it and you should love it.